Hey, and welcome everyone to our intermediate class in learning how to use the Flex framework. In today's class, we will learn how to create all the data parts for our contact management system. This includes all the forms and reports where you learn how to filter data, resize data parts, and rearrange them to create the best layout experience for your application users. We will learn how to stamp records with user IDs, how record level security works with roles, and how to insert parameters in different data parts. Let's have a look. All right, so now we're inside the Caspio account. Before I begin developing the data parts, let's do a quick recap on what we talked about in the basic session. So in the basic class, we talked about directories and how we add users into our directory. We talked about tables. Our application has a total of 4 tables. We created our contacts table by importing data from Excel. We built the logs table and the status lookup table, and our employee directory gets automatically linked to our tables because we use the directory in one of our data parts. And if you do that, you will eventually see your directory listed under tables as well. We also talked about roles. We created the admin role and a sales rep role. We learned how to set up custom permissions and default permissions if you want users to be able to create, read, update, or delete data. We also learned that when you set up a role and you navigate over to the Designer tab, each role is converted into what's called an app segment. An app segment is like a mini application within your application. Each one of these segments in between these two borders that you can see for admin and also the sales rep can be configured in the way that you want as far as look and feel, and each segment can look different one from the other. For example, you can see that my admin segment, we created 4 different app pages. And app pages are pages of your application. Think of it like a web page where you're eventually going to add all of your forms and reports. So my admin group has a navigation menu of 3 items: dashboard, manage contacts, and create contact. And that looks different from the sales reps, which have a navigation menu of, well, we're supposed to have 2, but I forgot to actually hide the contact details for the sales reps. So let's go into that segment, click on the navigation menu, and just click on the eye icon, and that's going to hide the contact details. To get to the contact details page, we're going to click on the data part element, for example, a button or a link, so that really doesn't need to be visible in our navigation menu. I also mentioned that you can move the navigation menu into a different panel. So if you're accessing the segment name and you see the visibility here, you could, show and hide these panels, and then you could move the navigation menu to the left, to the right, or inside the footer section. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention in the basic class, that each segment could also have its own theme. Themes pertain to colors. So for example, let's say we go into our public access. I don't want to make too many changes to my app pages. So if we go to the public access and we want to apply a different theme, for example, Onyx has a darker theme. We have Plum, and we also have Graphite. So you can change these themes based on your liking. I'm just going to revert back to my Azure and go back to what I had before, because that's my preference. I like the lighter theme as opposed to having a dark background, but to each their own. So that's a quick recap on what we learned inside the basic session. We also learned how to create a simple data part, which is our public-facing lead form. I mentioned in the basic class that if your application is completely internal and you don't have any public-facing components, you do not need to use a public segment. You can just collapse that and just work on your role, app pages, and segments. But because we have a public-facing lead form, we created an app page and then we added a data part to it. Now let's continue building the rest of our data parts for our application. That's going to complete everything, and you will see how everything comes together as I go through building each of the data parts. I will mention, just for the interest of time, I am not going to spend too much time on adjusting fields and creating multiple columns. I just want to get through the build, and then later on, if you'd like, you can work on the aesthetics and making sure that the layout corresponds to your own liking and the way you want the data to be presented. So let's go to create a contact app page. I'll begin here first because I know that the admin needs to be able to create a contact internally. So we are going to click on Add Elements, select the submission form, select the contacts table as our data source table. I will likely need most of these fields, user ID. We don't need company description. As I mentioned before, we are automatically going to populate that using GPT Connect in our advanced session. For the rest of the fields, I'm okay with. Let's click Next. And let's quickly modify some of these fields. So user ID, I know that the admin should have the capability to assign this contact to one of the sales reps. So what I will do, instead of a text field, I will select dropdown. I will make that field required, and we can rename the label to say assign to. Lookup table, we're going to select our employee directory, and then we're going to select the full name. So here's another benefit why it's useful to have a full name in its own field as opposed to first or last name. It's a little bit more unique than having to select just the first name because you could have multiple people with the same first name. Instead, I want to display the full name, and then for field for value, we're going to use the user GUID. And that's all we have to do here. Let's go to first name. Maybe you can make this field required, last name as well. You can go down the list of your fields. Remember, if you want to make fields into multiple columns, you could use sections, and under layout, you can choose how many columns you'd like to have. Or another method is to go to your first name, and under layout, you could say inline, and that's going to move the last name next to your first name. You have options for different layout in terms of label position, but for the interest of time, I'm going to keep all the labels to the left. The last modification I'm going to make is my status field. I will turn that into a dropdown as well. And we happen to have a lookup table that we created in our basic class that lists all the statuses. I want to display the status name and also store it as a status name. Once we're done with that, we can click on Save. And this form here is going to be accessed only by the admin level user when they log into the application, which in this case happens to be Sarah Lee. I'd like to add a heading to my form, so let's call this Create a Contact. Click on the app page, and we should be able to see that heading. And again, don't forget, as best practice, is to give your data parts a name. So you're going to click on the pencil icon in the upper right, and you're going to call this admin, or at least I'm going to call this admin Create a Contact. And click Save. Now, at this point, you could actually go to deployment and deploy that app page and see what it looks like when you log in as Sarah Lee. But I'm going to build a few more data parts before I get to that point. So let's move on to Manage Contacts. Click on Add Elements, and let's build a search form based off of the contacts table. As for your search fields, this is completely up to you. For me, I'd like to be able to search based on the sales rep name, who was that contact assigned to, maybe first and last name as well, maybe email, and perhaps the status itself. We're going to hit Next. Let's make a few modifications. For user ID, we can call this assigned to. We're going to turn that into a dropdown, lookup table, employee name. Once again, select the full name. User GUID is going to be our field for value. We have first name, we have last name, email, and then for status, once again, we're going to turn that into a dropdown, lookup table. Select our lookup table and make sure you select the actual display and value to be status. And when you're done at this point, you can click Save. Once we build our report, which is going to be the next step, you're going to see how we connect the filter and how we set up the filter to connect these fields from one data part to another. So at this point, I would click Save. And here's my search form. Now, you could expand this to be full screen if you'd like. You can go back here to where it was. Or if you, at some point, if you're visualizing this and you say to yourself, you know, I would like to put my results next to my search form. Or maybe you want to expand this to be full screen and put the results directly underneath and maybe make this a little bit less in height. You might see a scrolling bar up and down, so I wouldn't recommend that. But personally, what I like to do in this case is I'm going to just have it look like that, because when you actually deploy this and publish and you go full screen, your viewing area is not going to be this preview size. It's actually going to be full screen. So just play around with that, because even this is going to be expanded if you deploy this and publish it. It's not going to look like that, because the preview window that you see here is a lot smaller than the full screen of your computer screen. So let's leave it at that. Let's build our results page next. And let's go with the tabular format, contacts table. And what information do we want to display on the results page? Well, I know I would like to have the first name, last name, maybe title of the contact, maybe phone and email. Let's see who the contact is assigned to. Let's have the status and perhaps date created. We're going to hit next. No need to make any changes here. We can actually click save. And this will display my results. And I mentioned I want these two to be side by side, so I could just resize this a little bit, move it up next to it, and then here I can expand it to be full screen and just snap that to the grid in the background. Now, in order for this filtering to work, we need to connect the search data part to our results data part. But before I do that, remember, we want to name our data parts. This one still says new data part, so click on the pencil icon. And let's call this admin search contacts. Very quickly and easily, hit save. Let's name this one as well, admin results, or we can call this contacts results. Now, to connect the two data parts, when it comes to filtering, we have to set the filters. So you click on the results page, you click on set filters, create the filter. And let's begin. We can see that we have our 5 filtering fields. Let's begin with the user ID. So we want to filter based on user ID. That's going to be a drop down. So we want to just simply say select is equal to. Select the value, data part field, because we want to link that to a data part field. Data part field is going to be from manage contacts. Remember, this is our app page name, manage contacts. We want to select the search contacts, which is the search form, and you're going to link that to the user ID. Very simple. Okay, so which means that if you select the user ID or the name from this dropdown, the results page will filter because it's going to equal to that name. Let's hit save. Let's add another filter. This time let's do status, because we also have the status in the search form. So status is equal to data part field. Let's select manage contacts and let's select the status field and hit save. Okay, 3 more. We'll make these easier. So we have the first name. Now I want to use contains as opposed to equal to, because it gives you a broader results range. So as you're typing your name inside the first name field, you could type letter A, and then when you click search, you're going to get all the results that contain letter A. That's why we select contains, data part field, manage contacts, and then we select the first name and click save. Okay, so 2 more filters we need to set up. This one is going to be for the last name, contains. Let's do data part field, manage contacts, and last name. And last but not least, we have email, contains, data part field, manage contacts, and select the email field. Okay, once you're done, you can click save. Now, remember when we set up the contact details? Where do we click in order to go into the contact details? Well, we're going to select the results page. Look here to the right. Inside the right panel, we have interactive controls. We have a toolbar control. And what we can do here is we can simply say add label, let's call it details. And we want the action to be go to an app page and select your contact details. You can choose to have that open in a new tab. I'm not going to do that. Let's hit save. Now what's going to happen on the front end when you actually publish this app page, when you hover over the name itself, you can click on the details and it's going to redirect you to contact details. And this is why we don't include this to be part of our main navigation menu, because we're accessing the actual contact details. Okay, so let's move on. Let's go inside the contact details and let's create a details page or an update form so that the admin can update the details of that specific contact. So once again, the contacts table is the main data source table. We're going to include all the fields. For contact ID, we don't really need to have this be inside a details page. Let's have user ID so we can reassign the contact. All the other fields are going to be good because we also want to see company description. Once AI generates that description, we want to be able to see that. And all the other fields I'm okay with. So let's click next. And let's make a few modifications for user ID. Again, that's going to be a dropdown. You can rename the label to assign to, lookup table, select your employee directory, choose full name, first name, last name. All the other fields are okay. For company description, you could have that be display only. For all of your other fields, what you're going to do, if you want the ability for the admin to edit, you can change the form element into a text field for each one of these. Once you're done making modifications, I'm not going to go through all the trouble of doing that just for the interest of time, but just know that you want to modify each one of your fields if you want the admin to be able to update that information. I'll just change the status as well into a dropdown. Lookup table, status lookup, select the status field. And that's all I want to do here. We're going to hit save. There's the details view. Let's resize this. Let's add a heading, contact details. And let's rename the data part to admin, edit, contact details, and save. So the next thing that we want to create is a filter for the contact details. In order for you to know which contact you're looking at as far as the information, when you go from the results page to the details page, you have to set the filter here. That's how the system is going to know, okay, I'm looking at Rhiannon, or I'm looking at Scott, or I'm looking at Raj. So we need to set the filter. Let me show you how to do that. We're going to create the filter based on the contact ID is equal to data part field, select manage contacts, select the contact's results, not the search contacts, but the results, choose contact ID, and hit save. Hit save again. Now, when you go from the results page and you click on the details for each contact, in the details page, you're going to be accessing the details of that contact that you clicked on. So you have to make sure you set that filter. Now let's set up the results page for the logs. We're going to put that in the middle, right next to our contact details. Let's add the element. And let's go with a card so that we can see. Best practice here is if you're reading your logs, you don't want to use tabular because that's more of a, for short answer type, you get to see cells. But if you use card, then you can actually read the results for long text. It's a little bit easier on the eyes. So let's go with the card layout based off of the logs table. And let's see what information we want to include. We want to know who submitted the log type, date submitted, and the notes. Let's click next. For my label, let's just call this submitted by. Log type is fine. Date submitted, you can actually rearrange this. Let's move this up above the name, and then we have the notes. Let's hit save. Okay, so we're going to move this. Let's reposition it. And let's move this next to our details page. Again, I'd like to add a heading to my results page. So let's call this logs. Let's give the data part a name. So we're going to call this admin logs. And finally, what we want to create, let's move this in a little bit. We can always resize it later. Let's build a form that allows us to submit the logs. But before we do that, once again, need to do is we need to set the filter on this data part because we need to know which logs we're accessing for what contact. So very much like the contact details, you're going to select this data part, set the filter, create the filter, and you want based on the contact ID is equal to data part field, select manage contacts, results, contact ID, and hit save. and save once more. So now we have the filter set on the logs data part, which means when you click on the contact from the previous page and you go to the contact details, you will access that contact and you will see the logs that only pertain to that specific contact. Now let's set up the form that allows us to submit data. So we will add new element, submission form. Let's go into the logs data source table, and let's go ahead and include the user ID, contact ID, log type, and notes. We're going to need all these fields on our submission form. Let's hit next. For user ID, we don't need this field to be visible. Okay, so what we need to do is simply make that field hidden, insert parameter. We're going to use the authenticated user field and select the user GUID and hit insert, which means now that the user is logged in, each time that user that's logged in submits the form, we're automatically stamping that user's ID into our logs table. For contact ID, we also want to make this field hidden. Insert parameter. We're going to use DataPart field, manage contacts, results page, and then simply just select the contact ID and hit insert. We want to feed the contact ID into our logs form, so upon submission, we are storing that contact's ID into the logs table. That's how we associate the log to the contact. Then we have log type. For this one, you can just simply make this maybe a radio button, and you can say, add some custom values. Maybe it's a phone conversation that we had. Perhaps it was an email conversation or some other type of conversation that we had. And finally, we have notes. That's going to be a text area. You're probably going to make that field required. Same thing with log type. That field needs to be required. And when you're done, just go ahead and click save. All right, so there's my form. I'm just going to resize this a little bit and move it up above. Each time a user submits the form, we're going to be able to see that log in the middle for this specific contact. Let's add a heading. Create a log. And let's name our data part, admin, create a log. Okay, so we have officially created 3 data parts for the contact details. We don't need to do anything else here. If you would like to test the functionality of this so far, you could deploy these app pages and see how it functions. I will move on to dashboard. And now let's go ahead and build a few charts. I'm not going to create all 4. I'm just going to build 2 of them so that you can see the workflow. I will create a new element. Let's go with the column chart based off of the contacts table. And for the data that we want to display, I just want to be able to count the number of contacts. So you can include any field here that you want. It really makes no difference. I'm just going to go with the first name. And what we also want is the date field, date created, because I'm trying to plot and see how many contacts we are generating per month. I will click save. Now I want my x-axis to be the actual date. So what I'm going to do here on the panel on the right, I want to move the date field into my x-axis. Let's move it here. I'll probably have to replace. And chart display error, because I have to include a field in my y-axis as well. I will include the first name. Let's see what happens. And now it's grouping my data by a single day or when the data comes in. I want to group by month. So what we're going to do is click here, data grouping, and I want to group based on month and hit save. So we can now see how many contacts we generate per month. This is still preview mode. You can't really hover over the chart to see the data. And now to remove this label, we don't need to see the first name. We can click on these dots, and then instead of first name here for the label, just type out ampersand, MBSP, and semicolon like that. It is CSS and HTML compatible, so that's a workaround for now to exclude or to disable the first name label. And you no longer see that in there. You could also use a different field if you actually want the label to show up. If you want to give your axis a name, you can click on the gear icon for each one of these, and you can include an axis title. So for example, total contacts for the y-axis, and we can click save. And then for the x-axis, we can say date and hit save. All right, so let's build one more chart. This time I'm going to build a pie chart. I want to be able to see contacts by status. So let's add a new element, pie chart, based off of the same table. And I want the field status to be included. And let's also include the first name field. Click save. All right, so we will move this to the right next to our bar chart. And it automatically plotted everything for us the way we want to see. We can see how percentage of prospects, new leads, lead itself, and the customer. And as you add new leads, you can set the status, and this will automatically adjust based on the type of contact status that you have. If you need to make further modifications to your pie chart, just look over here on the right-hand side where you see the settings, and you can play around with the settings. There are a lot of features here on how you can further modify what's displayed. Again, we have the heading, so let's just keep with the best practice. We're going to say contacts by status for the second chart, and for the first one, we will say contacts by month. Also, don't forget to name your data parts, so this will be admin contacts by month. And this one here will be admin contacts by status. And we have officially built all of the functionality for the admin side. We're going to move on to the sales rep. It won't take as long because we don't have the dashboard, and we're going to go a little bit faster because now we understand the process of setting up filters. But if you navigate from one app page to another, you can see we have manage contacts that's created. We have dashboard, we have create a contact, and we also have contact details. Once we finish everything on the sales rep side, then we're going to deploy everything and test everything via the web. So let's move on to create a contact, add element, and let's add our submission form. And let's include all the fields. We're going to hit next. For user ID, now the admin has the ability to assign a lead or a contact to a sales rep. As a sales rep, when we add a contact, we don't want to do that. We just want to be able to stamp our ID because it's automatically going to know who submitted that form. However, if you want to give that ability to your sales reps as well to be able to choose a rep as they're adding the lead, that's up to you. I'm just going to make that field hidden, and we're going to use the authenticated user field, user GUID, and click insert. The rest of the fields, feel free to go through all of your fields to make modifications. I'm just going to make the first and last name a required field. And for my status, here we can actually create this to be a dropdown. Now on the public facing form, on the lead form, we flagged it as new by default. As a sales rep or as an admin, we want the ability to choose because you might have already had a conversation with this lead, or maybe you're talking on the phone and you want to flag that as in progress or a prospect or some other type of status. So we're going to just simply do a lookup table and select the status that we have, status name, and that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to hit save. Once again, give my data part a name. This time we're going to prefix this as sales rep, create a contact, and let's add a heading, create a contact. And you can see how the application is coming together just fine. Once you're done with all of the functionality for the sales rep, in the end, we're going to publish everything. We're going to have our public facing lead form, all of the functionality for the admin, as well as the sales rep. Let's go to manage contacts, create our search form. Let's search based on, you might actually have the same type of search fields as the admin here. It does make sense. What if I want to be able to find a contact that's been assigned to another sales rep? First name, last name, and let's have the status field. User ID, we're going to rename the label to either sales rep or assigned to. We're going to turn that into a drop-down, lookup table, employees, select your full name. And then for status, we are going to set that up as a drop-down as well. Name of the status and also status name. When you're done, click Save. Let's resize that because once again, I would like to have my search on the left and my results in the middle. So let's set up a new data part, tabular, contacts, and what information do we want to display? Well, let's have the first name, last name of the contact. Let's have title, phone, email, who the contact is assigned to, and let's have the status and date created, and click Next. No need to make any changes here. Let's click Save. All right, let's resize it a little bit, and then let's move it next to our search form, and then you can resize it again so it's full screen. Okay, let's again name our data parts. Sales rep, search contacts. It might be tedious to keep having to name your data parts, but believe me, in the long run, it's going to make a lot of sense because as we witnessed in the admin segment, we were quickly able to find all the data parts and app page names because we gave it a name. Contacts results. Now we need to set our filter. In order for the search and the results to work together, we're going to set our filters. Create a filter. Let's go with the assigned to is equal to data part field, manage contacts, search contacts, user ID, save. Let's add our status is equal to data part, manage contacts, right? So we want to select that underneath the sales reps. That's our sales rep segment. So we select manage contacts, which is this app page right over here. And on that app page, we have search contacts because we want to link to our search form status. Select status and click Save. Let's add two more for first and last name. This time we're going to use contains data part field, manage contacts, search contacts, first name, save, and last but not least, we have last name, contains data part field. Let's go with manage contacts, last name, and hit save and save. And now the search and results will work together. The last thing I want to do before I move on to the next app page is to make sure we include the details link for each contact. So come over here to record controls, click on add. Let's call this details and select your app page, contact details, and click save. Okay, let it update. We're going to see a lot of this functionality once we finally deploy everything. When you hover over the name, you're going to be able to see a pop-up, that details button that allows you to go to the contact details app page. Now, one thing I want to make sure I did the same thing for the admin side. I want to make sure I didn't use the toolbar controls and instead I use record controls. There's a difference. So let me go to manage contacts. And that's correct. You can see if you use the toolbar, it creates the details at the very top, and that's not what we want. So we're going to remove that and add it right over here under record controls. Let's call it details and app page and contact details and click save. Okay, so that's correct. Let's go back. Make sure everything looks good here. And if you'd like, you can add all of your headings. So you can say filter contacts if you'd like above the search form. And then here you can say contacts results for your results page. Okay, so let's move on. We have one more app page left before we deploy everything. So we will go ahead and click on contact details. And let's quickly do the same thing as we did before, create all three of those data parts. I will add elements. Let's go with the update form, contacts, and let's include all the fields except for user ID. I don't need to be able to reassign a contact as a sales rep. No need to see contact ID. That's just automatically created. And I'm good with everything else. Let's click next. Now for first name, of course, maybe we want to make that a text field so that we can update. Same thing with the last name. And you're just going to go through each one of your fields, make those adjustments. For my status field, you're going to turn this into a drop-down lookup table. Status. And when you're done, simply just click on save. and you can resize it. Now remember, because we have custom permissions enabled inside the Roles tab, if I'm logged in as John Doe and I'm accessing a contact that's not assigned to me using RLS based on permissions, John is not going to be able to update the contact's details if he or she is not assigned to that specific contact. Okay, and we set that up in our basic session. Now let's set up the logs in the middle. So we're going to create a new element and we want card. Let's go with the logs table. We want to be able to display person that submitted the log. We want to be able to display log type, date submitted, and notes. User ID, we're going to rename this to submitted by. Everything else can remain the same, and our date field can maybe be at the very top, and click save. I will resize this a little bit, move it up, move this in so that we make space for our submission form. And here we're going to add a heading logs. And for this, we'll add a heading contact details. Let's name our data parts, sales rep, contact details, and sales rep logs. Done. And again, you will see how it all comes together in the end. One thing that I do want to make sure we do for the logs is when you have it selected, scroll down here and then to the right, you want to be able to select a single column, because if you have auto, it's going to list it as a grid layout. So you're going to see logs side by side. But if you set it to one column, then you're just going to see one log underneath the other, which is going to be more legible and easier to read. So I will just make sure I did the same thing for my contact details in the admin side. We'll scroll down a little bit and just say one column. Let's go back to contact details and build our submission form. Add elements, logs. We need all of these fields in the form. And same as before, for user ID, we're going to make this field hidden. We're going to insert the parameter, authenticated user field, click on insert. For contact ID, make this field hidden, insert parameter, data part field. Make sure you select manage contacts, because we want to be able to receive the ID from AppPage that contains that data part, which is contact results. And this is why naming data parts is so beneficial, because I can quickly find what data part I need to link my data part to. So we selected contact ID, click insert. Log type, I'm going to turn this into a radio button, and same as before, add some custom values, maybe phone. Let's add email, and let's add other. Finally, we have notes. Let's make this field required. We have notes. We'll turn this into a text area, required field, and click save. All right, let's resize it, because we do need to make a few more modifications here. Let's add our heading, create a log. Okay, let's give it a name, sales rep, create a log. And the two things that we forgot to do is to set the filter on both of these two data parts. So for contact details, we're going to set the filter, create the filter based on the contact ID is equal to data part field. And we're going to select manage contacts, results page, contact ID, and hit save and save. And our logs, set the filter, create filter based on the contact ID, same as before, data part field, manage contacts, and contact ID, and hit save. And we have officially completed everything for this application and this use case. I am going to go ahead and now deploy my application. Of course, you might find some mistakes when you deploy. Maybe something is not working correctly, but that's easily fixable. If you just go back to your account, you can make those updates. So let's go inside deployment. Let's expand both of these app segments. Let's do a bulk deployment to deploy all of the data parts and all of the app pages. Same thing under this action as well. And with my public segment, it's already deployed. So we were able to go to our public segment in our basic session, we were able to submit this form. Now we are going to go ahead and log in as, let's start with the admin. So we will click on this link. It's going to take me to the login screen, Sarah Lee at acme.com. My password was test123! We will log in and there you have it. We can see both of these two charts. We can hover over. We can go to manage contacts. You can see what it looks like. If you get to this screen and you tell yourself, you know what, I forgot to add a heading for my search form in my results page, you can go back inside the designer tab, manage contacts. Here's my data part. Add your heading, filter, add your heading, contacts results. And all you need to do is simply just refresh your page and we will see those changes immediately. If you ever get to this point where you see a scrolling bar, now you can go back again and just make that a little bit taller so you can see the buttons, come back, and it instantly updates that change. And now we can filter. So if I wanted to see leads assigned, and you can see that in my data set that I imported from Excel, unfortunately, that data didn't have that user ID field populated, so I would have to either do a mass update or some other way of updating all of my previous entries. But let's say we wanted to filter maybe based on the first names that contain letter A, and we click search. It filters out all the first names that contain a letter A. Okay, you can remove or reset the filter, and it brings back all of the first names. One other thing here is if you go into the contact details, now you see the logs, details, and create a log. So if I make one entry, let's just say we had a phone conversation with Rhiannon. They said they will fax the contract sometime today. We'll hit submit, and we can see that log stored directly in the middle here. Now, lastly, as the admin, we should be able to create a contact as well. So we see the submission form. If you, again, think that the fields are too wide, you can go back inside Designer, go to create a contact, and you can simply just resize that, maybe make it a little bit smaller. Come back here and you will see that change. So you can easily make the updates inside Preview, inside your account, and as soon as you refresh your screen, you'll see those changes updated immediately. All right, so now we're going to log out and log in as our sales rep. So let's go back to our deployment screen, and we are going to log in under Manage Contacts. So let's log in as John Doe. So I'm logged in as John Doe. We see similar functionality. We can create a contact, even though I want to manage contacts to appear ahead of create a contact. So if you want to do that, just go back to your Designer tab. Inside the app segment for sales rep, click here and then just reposition your navigation menu that way. And once again, when you reload the screen, you will now see how Manage Contacts appears ahead of Create a Contact. So let's go Manage Contacts. Let's go to the Details page. And notice that because I'm not assigned to this specific contact, as John Doe, I don't have the ability to manage or update that information. However, I can add a log, which is typical in a CRM application. Anyone can add logs, but if you're not assigned to that lead, you shouldn't have the permissions to make updates and modify that information. So we have completely created all of the interfaces for our application. We tested it out. Everything works the way it's supposed to. As always, when you're building an application, it's a never-ending process. So in time, you'll probably have to make changes, make updates, expand upon it. It's inevitable because the business will change and you're going to want to make those updates. But I hope you enjoyed the intermediate session. Thank you for your time, and I hope to see you in the advanced class, where we're going to introduce some more advanced topics such as AI, tasks, triggered actions, so that you can see how we can automate some of the procedures to reduce a lot of the human intervention. Again, thank you for your time. Have a good day, and I hope to see you in the advanced class. Bye-bye.